Thank you again for being here. And I'm so sad I forgot to record the meditation. Wow. Oh, there are no accidents. All right. Okay, so here's what's up. We are going to anchor this energy, the energy codes that are coming in now. I want to empower you that if you're feeling uncomfortable, picture in your mind's eye a dial and simply turn it down. You are in 100% control of what you receive and how much. Soul Channel came to me in my last workshop, and the universe has been telling me since December, it's time to collaborate. It's time to collaborate. Please hear that with the heart-centered intention it holds. We are not here to run a solo race. We're here as a team. And the objective of the Soul Channel is to bring great minds to more people, to share wisdom, to share energy, to empower individuals to grow into their greatest self, to normalize spirituality and raise consciousness around the world. And I believe that this is my contribution to do this. Brian and I met, 2.5 weeks ago, and it was fast and furious. And we just said, yes, we've got to do this. And since then, I have had 5 people ask me to partner on Soul Channel. 5 people. I'm honored to be the vehicle. I'm grateful that I get to channel for you and anchor with the wisdom of many. So it looks like I'm doing this every 2 weeks. Giddy up. Let's go. So most of you, all of you, should be on my email list. Of course, if you don't want to, you can just say go away. I won't be offended at all. And expect to receive more information about upcoming soul channels. And yes, channeling will be part of each and every offering. So one final housekeeping note, because my attention is fully focused on you, I am not likely going to see any messages through the chat, and I will check it afterwards. And you're welcome to email me directly if you have questions or just want a perspective. I'm happy to share. So, without further ado, for the man of the hour, Brian Bachand, he is going to share his story, starting with his foundation.
Well, Teresa, thank you for the opportunity to be with you. Teresa and I had the joy of meeting during the pandemic, like so many virtually. And it was one of those connections immediately that was different. There was a very soulful connection, a deep, sincere connection. You know, one of the things that drives me crazy is when you meet people sometimes at a first meeting, they're like, what can I do for you? You know, and, you know, it's a weird thing. And they don't really do anything. It's just sometimes they feel it's something they want to say. But Teresa is a woman of her word. That's throughout our time together the past couple of years, I would get these introductions to wonderful people, or Brian, would you be interested in this? That's truly an evolution of what it means to be of service. And Teresa, you're so beautiful. what you've created in this particular time right now is a beautiful gift for all of us to come together in our intentions and to really be open. So thank you, what you continue to put out to the world. And so when I met with Teresa a couple of weeks ago and she invited me to be part of this, we had a conversation. She's like, so like, what do you want to talk about? Like, what would you want to be part of? And I mentioned one thing that was a great topic, and she goes, that's really great. And she's like, I love that. And I said, however, I kind of feel I need to talk about something I haven't talked about. And of course, she said, well, that's the one we have to do then. And so to speak about spirituality and to speak about religion in my evolution, I certainly have spoken about this, but I want to go a little bit deeper today because, you know, just in a nutshell, the life of Brian was, I was raised Roman Catholic. I actually went to the seminary. I was a Catholic priest for 8 wonderful years, and then freely decided to leave and went on to create a whole new life for myself and standing in my truth. But it's been one evolution. And that sense of from faith to a deeper spirituality is something that has really grown in who I am and where I am. And that's what I want to share with everyone here today, because I would imagine that the majority of individuals who are live listening, for those who are listening in the future, most of us probably began our path of spirituality based in a religion and what that means. And so for myself, you know, I'm the youngest of 5 children. I was born into a family that, you know, was Catholic. We went to mass, you know, every Sunday. And it wasn't one of these families that we said grace before meals. We said grace before meals at Christmas and Easter. It was kind of the craziest thing. But the sense of God, the sense of the presence of God was spoken about on a regular basis. So for example, as a child growing up, you know, there was a sense if I was nervous about a test, my mother taught me the sandwich prayer, which I used to be very anxious. It was like when you sit down at your desk and get your paper, say a prayer that God will help you to remember all that you can. And in the middle of taking the test, put your pen down and say a prayer of thanks for what you remembered, ask for help in any area. And when you hand the test in, just say a prayer of thankfulness, the sandwich prayer. I still remember, I'm 51 years old. I still remember it. That beautiful sense of spirituality. There was another prayer that before I used to leave for school, my mother used to say with me right at the kitchen door. I was grabbing my little lunch to run out to catch the school bus. And it was a prayer we'd say together, especially when I was very young. Sometimes I was very nervous going to school or I wanted to do really well. And my mother had this prayer and it went like this: Lord, help me to remember that nothing is going to happen to me today that you and I together cannot handle. You can replace that word Lord with universe, spirit, love, whatever it is. But that prayer, that opened up my sense of spirituality. That opened up that connection with the divine at a very, very young age as I was going to school. And one of the things about growing up Catholic, and for those of you maybe Catholic, was the sense of saints. And I remember being, as a young child, intrigued by these humans that did extraordinary things. I remember learning in religious education classes about the saints that died, the saints that took care of the sick, the saints that really loved people. And there was a sense that I was inspired by them. And there was one Sunday that we were seated at church. Our family always got to church early. It used to drive me crazy as a kid. We would be rushing out of the house to go wait. We'd wait in the car and then we'd go in and we'd wait. We were like 20 minutes early. We always sat in the same spot. It was like our little family thing. And I remember sitting there in the church. I probably had to be maybe the 2nd grade or 3rd grade. And there were stained glass windows in the church, and they were of saints, different saints. And I remember as the light was coming in on this very New England, I grew up in Boston, this very New England October day, the sun was coming through, and I looked at the stained glass window of a saint, and I tapped my mother on the shoulder and I said, is there a saint school you can go to become a saint? Is there a school you can go to study? And I remember my mother looked at me and she said, she didn't know what to say, I think. She kind of, I don't remember, she was kind of like, well, it's all the way you live and, you have to be good, all the stuff. But I remember she said something, well, there are some people that do go to study to become priests. There's like a seminary or, convents and things. So so that was always there, that sense of spirituality, that connection to the divine. But I think what happened is I grew in my spirituality within a church structure. It starts to get squished down. And it really, for me, started to get squished down a little bit because I really felt that there was a connection to God and the divine, but there was also a sense of right and wrong, black and white, what God would do. And that was a formation that started. And I think that's where, for me, as much as I loved being connected with the saints and what I was learning in the church, and it actually drew me into becoming a priest, there was a sense, I look back at that time, of that you had the answers, that you were being told what to believe and how to believe it. And that really is something that I stayed grounded in because it felt safe. And it was also something I saw later in my parents as I got older. There was a sense of being grounded in that the church said this is what we do, kind of following the rule of the law, but not the spirit of the law. And that really had an impact. And so for me, one of the greatest gifts was when I was in the seminary, I was sent to Ecuador one summer. I had the opportunity, I was free to do one summer only. I could do anything I wanted. And there was an opportunity through something called the St. James Society. It was a mission organization. And they used to run these special 2-week trips to bring seminarians down to work in their missions in Peru or Ecuador or Bolivia. And I, for some reason, came up with this great idea. I said, well, I don't want to do 2 weeks. I'm going to go for the summer. So on my own, I contacted the St. James Society and I said, I want to introduce myself. Is there any way you could arrange for me to go to Ecuador or one of your mission locations for 3 months? For 3 months. And I want to work in one of your places. I want to learn the language and work with the poor. I don't know what I was thinking because I didn't speak any Spanish and I had no clue what I was getting into, but I was drawn into this. Kind of like when I said, is there a saint school you can go to? I was being drawn into this aspect. So they agreed. I told my parents I was going and they were like, okay. And next thing I know, I'm on a plane in June and I land in Guayaquil, Ecuador. And I remember when the plane door opened, it was like landing on the sun, the humidity, it was so hot. And I was sent to a village that was so poor. I had never in my life seen poverty the way that I was all of a sudden seeing. People, some of them didn't have shoes. They were living in these huts. It was intense. And I was only there a couple of days and I was paralyzed with fear, paralyzed because I didn't know what to do. I couldn't communicate. I was the tallest person. I stuck out. Everyone knew I was the foreigner and I felt so insecure and so alone. And everything that I believed, I felt was gone. And what did I do? I called my dad and I started talking to him on the phone after being there. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. I'm so scared. This is just awful. And I remember he said, you're going to be fine. Trust the experience. And so what I did is every day when I was on these buses going to villages, I started talking to God. I started getting back into, instead of saying rote prayers to kind of ground me, I started just talking to God and to my guardian angel. saying things like, oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful palm tree. Wow, I'm really kind of scared today. I don't know what I'm going to see. Help me figure out help me, do what I need to do today. Oh my gosh, I hope that my air conditioner is working when I come back today because I'm so hot. Really, and sharing things, because that moment, those 3 months, deeply in an interior way, helped me to connect with the divine as a friend. That it wasn't just in statues or in dogma, it was in me. And that's where God was living. And it was seeing it in the eyes of the people that I was so afraid of, that really had beautiful love to give in their generosity. And so that was a powerful experience of spirituality connecting inwardly from the heart for me. And I became a priest, and it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And I always felt a little different as the priest because I always connected from the human side. Even my homilies were always human-centric because it was all about taking the gospel or different aspects and putting it into a lived practical reality. And as I worked through the church and I was in that moment, I really believe there was something that wasn't connecting. I started seeing in many ways the humanness of the church, and I started seeing beliefs of the church that weren't resonating for me anymore. It didn't start to make sense that certain beliefs were there. And I knew in my heart that I was at a moment of transition. And I decided to take some time to do some deep inner work and to really come to terms with what was evolving in my soul and what was evolving in me as a person to be able to go forward. And I decided that it was time to step away from active ministry. First of all, to realize and accept fully that I was a gay man, that I wanted to love from my heart and be free about that there was no shame in that. What the church had taught and what they were saying, I was seeing two different worlds of how they were portraying that. And I was like, that's not right. And I knew I could bring my life in a different way. And one of the biggest lessons that I had about integrating from a religion that I loved, people often ask me, oh my gosh, when I left the priesthood, are you gonna join another religion? That was the number one question people ask me all the time. And I said, I invested way too many years. I'm not interested to learn more things. I said, being Catholic was a gift, and I saw more good than bad. But I know my purpose, my soul evolution was to go and to start there and to expand from that moment. And to learn the difference between conditional and unconditional love. That is the underlying component for me in my growth, in learning how that when you open your heart and your soul up, you do go on a path of learning in a new way. The number one lesson I learned when I left the priesthood and moved to New York City was God still loved me. That was the number one gift, because what I was told to believe was, unless you're doing everything that the church said, you will never be blessed. God cannot bless you in a certain way. And when I left and I was living my life in New York, I started getting many blessings. I was living in my truth. I was living in who I was. And there was blessing after blessing and synchronicity after synchronicity. And it showed me that God, the universe, is bigger than what we can contain sometimes and where we're at. And that was a powerful moment to keep trusting and growing spiritually and being open. There's aspects of whatever religion we were brought up in that are beautiful. Every religion has a beautiful aspect. And that is a powerful way that oftentimes we're invited to grow and to be part of. but we are also invited to go deeper. No church, no organization is the only way. Our spirit may learn from parts of it, but it also wants to grow deeper. One of the things that happened to me was when I left, I also went on this deeper aspect. There were many beliefs in me that were very deep that I thought weren't an issue. But there were things like meditation, yoga, different things that I was told that, oh, they're not good. Those are things that, the church would say there's danger areas in those areas. And I remember when a few years after I left and I started really getting into meditation and being there, it opened up an aspect. I'm like, it was so powerful. There was a deep, deep, deep connection that opened up a sense of who I was in a new way. So for example, there was just this overwhelming sense of presence. I think when for me, when I was able to really open up and just be present and know where I was and who I am, I felt the switch of spirit coming through me in a very different way. In a very profound way, one of the things that really happened too is in the Catholic tradition, reincarnation was something that you were told never to believe. That's something you can't do. You couldn't be cremated. I remember learning this in the seminary, someone cannot be cremated if they are denying the resurrection, because that means they don't believe in the body being, kind of crazy things, but they're deep. Those are deep things. But as I started becoming more and more into my spirituality, I started to realize, well, it only makes sense that our souls, whether they reincarnate just once or as other times, they are here to learn. They are always learning. And there are things that all of us have encountered in our life that can make us feel a certain way and realize, is this something you're learning from the past? When I was in the seminary, well, actually, when I was a child, Anne Frank always captured my attention. The story of Anne Frank just was so powerful to me. And when I was in the seminary, my very last interview, I remember they asked me, Brian, if you could have been a priest at any time in the world, when would you have been a priest? I thought it was a very interesting question. And I looked and I said, without reservation, it would have been in World War II in Germany. Who says that? It just came right out of me. And I just went through the reasons why. And I remember the priest at the end of me looked at me and he said, that's an amazing answer. Thank you. Well, that led me to writing my thesis about priests that rescued Jews during the Holocaust. And I started realizing, I said, wow, maybe there's some connection here. Maybe there's a connection, to something in the past or learning. So it opened up that sense of, that our soul does learn, from different times. And I think I started to realize, wow, there are things that happen, that seem very familiar, and to open that up. And only being open in that sense of spiritual aspect, it really started to be open in a deeper way. One of the other things that I think is really powerful is spirituality came from a beautiful sense of learning through the religion I was brought up in. Do I go to Mass every Sunday? Am I a practicing Catholic? No, I feel for me has evolved in a very different way. But I know the roots of so many beautiful aspects of trust and prayer, especially with guides, comes from my Catholic tradition. We often speak about angels and our guides who are around us. And I really feel that was something that's really came from my understanding with the saints, as I said at the very beginning. And to realize that guides are around us, those who pass on. When I was a priest and I did so many funerals, I used to love doing funerals. I used to get so excited because it was so powerful to be there, to commend that life that had been there and to be there to comfort their loved ones, but to also realize spiritually there was a connection that they were still living, they were still going on. And I think that is the sense of spirituality of how that's opened up. A couple of years ago, I was in Colombia and I walked into a church and I remember just being drawn down the aisle. I still love visiting churches. You know, I love going in, and maybe you do too. There's something of the quiet, of the candles, of the peacefulness. And I walked down the aisle of this church in Colombia. It was a beautiful church in this square. And I was brought down. And it wasn't the most beautiful church. There was just something I was being drawn to walk all the way down to the front. And I sat down in the front row. And all of a sudden, my head turned, and there was a statue of Saint Therese of the Little Flower, is her name. And I looked, and I had a great devotion to her when I was in the seminary and when I was a priest. And after I left, I kind of stopped. I stopped talking to her. And all of a sudden, when I saw that statue, internally, I heard, I never left you. I'm still here. And I knew at that moment, it just touched my heart. And I said, thank you. I'm so happy to be back with you. Saint Therese is known that she said she died very young. She wrote a beautiful book called Autobiography of a Soul, and really about her whole life. And her sense is, she said, when she was going to die, I'll do more of my work from heaven, from the other side. And her sign are roses that, when your prayer is being answered or you speak to her, she'll send you a rose. The next day, after this beautiful encounter from the heart of feeling reconnected with like an old friend, that's what it was like, an old, beautiful friend. I was in this market in Colombia buying flowers to bring to a dinner that I was going to that night, when all of a sudden, the other shopkeeper came out to me and handed me 2 magnificent roses and said, these are for you. And I knew it was because I was with my partner and I was there, and I knew it was from her. As a beautiful sign, you're exactly where you need to be. To me, that was the fullness of religion and spirituality, and also a sense of you're on the right path and you keep moving forward. I share this with you because every single one of us are on our path. And spirituality is the breath of the soul of being open. Beliefs are powerful when they align with our spirits, when they are moving us forward in truth and in love and in peace. But beliefs are not divine when they are holding us back in who we are, or there's a conditional aspect on how we're living. That is when we need to address what it really means. That sense of spirituality is so powerful because it keeps us aligned and in tune with the energies that are in us, around us, and connected. And there may be times, and this is the important message I want people to know, that there may be times we are part of something that's organized, and there are times that we may be invited to go in a different path and return and mix both, or wherever it may be. That is the soul and the spirit that is leading. And it's very, very powerful. I want to end on this, and then I want to open it up for any conversations as well, or questions, and you put them in the chat or unmute. In December of this year, my mother at 88 years old was taken suddenly extremely ill. And I had to fly back from Colombia to Boston, and I was there. And I remember my mother was a beautiful person, but there was a lot of conditional love, especially through the eyes of religion, that if you weren't doing what religion was saying or doing what she thought you should be doing, imagine being the former priest who who came out being gay, trust me, we've had to work on a relationship. And, that has been something that she was taken sick, and I'm back. I was not happy the first day I got there. I was feeling a little overwhelmed, like, like this is, and I sat outside the rehab before her ambulance arrived to bring her from the hospital. And I closed my eyes. I was doing some breathing, getting into that sense of spirit. And it became so clear to me, this is a mission of love. This is about showing unconditional love. And only by opening up that spirit, calling upon my guides, saints, and others, I was able to walk in a spirit of peace and to be there. And over the couple of weeks that she was in rehab, every night I was there, and as she would go change, she'd come back into her room, she'd get into bed. We started a little kind of ritual. She would get in, she had this special blanket that my niece had given her, and I used to place it over her. She'd have her little book, and I'd sit on the edge of the bed. And at 88 years old, I would take her hand and I would say, Lord, help me to remember that nothing's going to happen to me today that you and I together cannot handle. In saying that prayer with your 88-year-old mother, it was her lesson to learn unconditional love. And it was my gift to know that my spirit was fully alive in who I am and who you are to be as well. So I will pause there, and I welcome any questions on any of these topics and however it may have resonated or anything you wish to speak.
I first want to acknowledge the absolute beauty of the share. Your story is so inspirational, Brian. It needs to be heard all around the world. And anything I can do to support that happening, you've got it.
Thank you.
Living a life with alignment within and coming from love is the only way to change this world. And so if you'd like to raise your hand. Yeah, Kim.
Thank you, Brian. I sometimes refer to myself as a recovering Catholic, so I could really relate with your story. Love that you got choked up at the end because you were talking about deep love. And sometimes people are afraid of that deep love. And when you gave it and you saw her receive it, that should bring us tears of joy to know that we have that power to be with each other and give each other that gift. My question is, are you familiar with Father Richard Rohr's and his work?
Beautiful.
Yeah,
I get his emails. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, just like, I feel like he's done such profound work for just even being raised as a Catholic, to have somebody like him. So just any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for your words. That's really, really beautiful. And I would say Father Richard Rohr is incredible because I think what he has done is that he's demystified in so many ways this, the splendor of the church and taking dogma and different things and bringing it down to a place of integration and also initiation for individuals to own the sense of faith in a beautiful new way. So I think he is profound. I think he's one of these individuals that, even when he passes on, his work will live for many, many years and touch many generations. So I think it's beautiful you're connecting. I think he's like, and if he resonates for a lot of people because it's always peace focus. It's always peace focus. And that's the difference. It's not a, this is what it is. And it's really, really peaceful. So yeah, I think it's great. And I think, there's also a big movement as well. I think within the Catholic tradition, there are people that are shifting and seeing things in a different way too. And I'm seeing in some areas that some people that I know, I'm still in touch with several former parishioners that, they're proud, they're happy to be Catholic, but there's this deeper sense of spirituality that's now happening in their life. They're more open to things. And I'm seeing that transform, especially in a younger generation. But I'm also seeing, and what I can see too, is there's also some really strong right-wing people that are trying to hang on to stuff. So it's like the political situation right now, almost like in the US, you know what I mean? It's like, there's good things.
Lower, I'm going to talk.
Oh. Heather, you're off mute.
So sorry.
That's okay. So yeah, thank you so much for your question, Kim. Thank you.
Did you want to share, Heather? Is that what I heard?
Sorry.
It's okay.
Diane, this really resonates for me because I found my spirituality through Judaism. And it was because I found a rabbi that did not support just one denomination. He considers himself a rabbi for all Jews. In Judaism, there's, extreme Orthodox, Hasidic, and there's Orthodox, modern Orthodox, there's Reform, and there's conservative. And there's always issues within each sect. And
sure,
he's a real spiritual rabbi. He's written multiple books, and he talks about so much acceptance. And so that's why I've gravitated to that. And I'm curious if you've ever collaborated or come in contact, not to sort of learn from, but to learn with other spiritual leaders like yourself who transcend the religion and see themselves in a more spiritual way. I'm just curious if you've ever had that
yeah, well, first of all,
before.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I used to always say, I remember I got some like odd looks when I was in the seminary. I said, if I wasn't Catholic, I'd be Jewish. And, because that's where we all come from. And even in the seminary, I was the head of the interfaith dialogue in the seminary. I started these programs between the Catholic seminary and the Orthodox seminary. When I was a priest, there was a temple in the town, and I went to the rabbi and I said, do you want to teach a class with me for the high schoolers? And we called it the priest and the rabbi. And it was amazing. So we used to have the students from the temple that would come. We did a tour. We did the things in the temple. So interfaith was always a big part of who I am. And I've always been drawn to that. And that's something I love. One of the things that happened to really answer your question, one of the things that I felt called to do, kind of like what Teresa was saying about, she just said yes. She started these circles, bringing people together, is when I finally owned really sharing my story that I was a priest, I went to New York. I knew when I went on my own, I had to share the story more. And I was nervous to do. And by chance, the universe set me up sitting next to this woman at an event who worked for CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company. And next thing I knew, 2 weeks later, she pitched me to the producers to do an interview that went all over Canada, all over the United States on Sirius XM radio, sharing my story. Next thing I knew, all these former priests started connecting with me. Started crazy, all over the place, sending me messages. I heard your story, blah, 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 blah. So I'd have all these one-off conversations with them. And one day I was making my bed and I was making it, and I said a prayer. I said, God, what am I supposed to do with all these guys? And all of a sudden, as I pressed out the sheet, the duvet to make it look perfect, I heard, bring them together. So I did a Zoom and I called it From Pulpit to Evolved Purpose. And guys came in from Ireland, Spain, all across the US, and every guy shared their story of why they left and where they are now. And many are married, many doing different things. And it turned into a monthly event for a year and a half. Now I do a quarterly. And it brought so much healing, that seeing that they still had this deep purpose. Many were were on that path of trying to integrate spirituality and religion. They still felt kind of torn between two worlds. Some had really gone out. And it has been a powerful group of healing. One of the guys last week I connected with, and he was a tremendous gift for me in a situation. So yeah, we do. And I love that. And I want more of that. And I think that that's the gift out into the world. So it's a long answer to your question. You can tell you got me all excited. So yeah, I love that.
And I would just loved the opportunity to continue this conversation outside of here.
Absolutely.
Because I think there's something we have together.
Beautiful. Please
in
connect.
common.
I would love to.
Well, Heather, great segue. Because I know you all felt what I felt during that. And I also know that there's so many other stories that Brian can share that will inspire you. And so, Brian, will you share with everybody how they can reach you, what you've got going on in your world, how they can work with you, all the good, yummy stuff?
Thank you so much. So, one of the things, you can connect with me, obviously through Teresa. You need my information, connect there. That's number one. Number two, you can certainly reach out to me at my email, which is a fun one. It's Brian with an I, BRIAN, at evolution.com. So, that's a great way to reach out. There's a website, evolution.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So you can send a message there. I do a live show every single Monday that airs live on LinkedIn, but it's also turned into a podcast. It's called Soulfully Speaking with Brian Bachand. The show is just 17 minutes and it's kind of my soul classroom. I just started it on October 17th on my birthday. And I have to tell you, I love it. And I'm just having so much fun with it and speaking about topics I really love. And one of the greatest things that I'm offering, and I invite anyone to come, especially if you're in the States, it's a great deal, US dollar. I'm offering an in-person retreat, April 22nd, here in Toronto. And it's called A Spring Cleaning for Your Soul. And it's something I've always loved retreats. And I have another wonderful person I'm invited in, who's going to be doing some energy work and really touching into our body and really going through a sense of how do we, tap more deeply into that energy. Like in the springtime, we need to re-clean things. We also need to get rid of things that might be inside that we're holding on to. And so I'm doing it. It's from 11 to 5. There'll be a beautiful organic lunch, catered lunch, and food and meditation, and really walking out with some practical ways to implement that into your life with a clarity, with a newness. So if that resonates, feel free to reach out. Welcome to have you come to Toronto. It's a great deal, and love to have you. So that's where I'm at. And, I also work one-on-one with individuals and organizations. So, happy to share more.
Thank you. And if you can get to Toronto, do it. If I wasn't traveling a couple of days later and heading to Europe, I would be there because it will be this powerful. And I know the gal that he's bringing in to do the energy work, clean energy, heart-centered. She's amazing. So yeah, it feels
and there's a 30%
amazing.
discount till Monday. So, connect with me. So,
Oh,
there you go. It doesn't get better. But it'd be lovely to have you if it resonates. And stay tuned for other ones as well.
good. And thank you to each and every one of you. Each of you contributed to this energy and allowed us to vibrate out into the world deep love and collaboration. That's the foundation for us to change the world. And that's my goal. I want to change the world. And this, I believe from my heart, is how to do this. You know where to find me. You'll be receiving more notifications on upcoming soul channels. The next one's with Charlene Shaw. She'll be talking about mental fitness. Will be a lot of fun. I will be doing meditation. The universe has already told me what I'll be doing. And I also have an opening, which doesn't happen often, on my one-on-one work. So if you feel drawn, reach out. I would love to have a conversation and see if we have a great fit. Doesn't happen often, but when it does, I know the right person is waiting and ready to step into more powerful inner expression. So with that, everybody unmute and say goodbye. And I want to, again, thank you for being here.
Thank you,
Teresa.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Brian.
Thank you,
so much.
Brian.
Bye.
Thank you, Teresa. That was really
Thank you,
beautiful.
guys.
So
Have a
beautiful.
great day. Good weekend. Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys. I am going to.
Thank you, Teresa.
You are so welcome. There we go.
I think you're still recording.
Perfect. Thank you.